Okay, before we get started on the next step in this tutorial, we need to discuss a couple things. One, if we look at our references, we'll see, and maybe that's not the best picture to take a look at it. Let's see if the first one's better. Yeah. So you can see, right, that these edges here are rounded as well. And so we've got this rounded edge here. If we look down here, this is rounded, right? We probably want to bevel in a similar way to what we did to those other parts. And you'll notice that that bevel impacts things. And something I want you to note is one of the things that a lot of beginning modelers don't do is they don't bevel the edges of their model. Even if you have a hard corner like this, there's always a little bit of rounding. And you can see it in this picture where that tiny bit of rounding creates a highlight. And if you don't have that highlight, you get very flat looking models that don't have depth and feel like they don't have depth and volume to them. Now, if you're working on something for a video game, you might want to not bevel those edges to reduce the polygon count and just have it be as simple as possible. Or you might want to change your settings so you just have like your corners cut off a little bit, so you have a little edge, but not a lot. And because these panels kind of wrap around at the same angle that this does as well, we probably do want to bevel these top edges for sure, and we might as well bevel those two bottom corners too. So let's go ahead and do that first, and then we're going to get on to how the heck we're going to make these different panels here. Okay, so to start beveling these, let's go ahead and go to points mode, and we're going to select the corners that we want to bevel. We definitely want to do those two, and we definitely want to do these two. And in fact, we might want to hold off on this one, which if you've selected something and you want to deselect it, you hold Control and click and drag to deselect. Shift adds to your selection. So let's just select those inner corners. We can always bevel more if we want to. And then, right, this whole edge needs to be beveled. So we're going to grab these corners too. We're going to use our bevel tool. And to start with, let's just use the settings we've already used. And let's just go ahead and hit apply. Right. And so that's not really doing it for us. Those top corners aren't really doing what we would like them to. And you can kind of see that we're getting something crazy happening across the entire body of this thing. So let's go ahead and undo that. So that might not be the best mode to be working in to make these bevels. So let's go ahead and go to edges mode. And let's go ahead and select these two edges that we want to bevel. Let's start with that. And and then we could go ahead and hit apply on this and see, oh, so that worked a lot better. They're not quite as big as the bevels in our reference, right? Those are a little bit more substantial. So let's undo that, right? Anytime you do something and it doesn't work the way you think it will, try it in a different mode. Try it with polygon mode, try it with edges, and you'll get most likely a better result. So let's go ahead and make this a little bigger. Our offset was 0.97. Or 0.9. Let's just try 1.5 and see what we get. Okay, that's a little bit better. That looks a little bit more accurate. We're going to go ahead and stay with that. And then let's go ahead and see if we can bevel these these points by themselves. So let's go back to points mode. And we're going to just deselect everything by clicking off in space so we don't forget any points that we've selected. We're going to select those 2 points, go to bevel, and we can start by just seeing what happens with that. And then we can check our reference. It looks pretty good, honestly. It looks like these points might want to be closer to the center line. It looks like there's a bit more taper than I made in my model, but that's not the end of the world. Okay, so we've got those roundings done and we've got the roundings up there. Excellent. Let's go ahead and start working on these side panels. So the side panels are here, but then they wrap around the top of the model as well. And so we're going to be using the cut tool to do this again, but we're going to need to potentially change views. We'll see how this works. And then there's a few other possibilities for things that could go sideways with this. But let's go ahead and select the polygons that we want to potentially cut. All right, so we're going to go ahead and actually do this in this mode. We're going to go to polygon mode, and we're going to use our selection tool. We're going to make sure visible only is selected, and we're just going to click and drag because, right, we want to be able to cut a little bit into the top and through that side because we want to create something that wraps around that bevel. Okay, and we're only doing one side, and we're going to then use symmetry to create the other object once we get done with that. Okay, so let's go to our side view. And now that we have all of that set, let's use our knife tool. And because we know that we aren't cutting beyond the edge here, we can go ahead and put a cut there, come over to here, up to here, up to here, up to here-ish. And then it looks like it wants to go, and then we're going to go just up to that top edge. And now we're going to see if we can go into our top view. And so it's cut up to the top edge of our bevel, and that's actually kind of perfect because that's about where we want this to end. Let's hit the escape key on the keyboard to set that cut. Now what we need to do is we need to select just the polygons that we want to use for this panel. So we're going to use our selection tool, select nothing, click on here, and then select all the way up, zoom in a bit, make sure we got all of that. Okay. All right, so we've got this section of polygons. Now what we're going to do this time is we're going to use split like we did here because we're going to want this to be its own shape. But we're going to make one change to the settings. So we're going to right click here. We're going to go to split, but we want to click on the settings. And this time we want to keep the polygons in their source object, right? We want to leave those polygons there. So we're going to hit OK. And now we should have this head 1, which is our side panel. And let's go ahead and we're just going to go ahead and thicken this, and maybe we'll move it out from the side of the object a little bit. Let's go ahead and rotate our view. Yeah, you can see at this point that it's set to the side. Let's see if we can change. If we click on the move tool, right, the modeling axis says selected, position is object, let's say normal. And let's see if we get any useful normals out of that. That is not the case right now. Okay, so, and none of that's going to work. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and leave it here. And we might just go ahead and pull this out from the side just a touch. All right, so we've pulled it out from the side a touch, and we might lift it up a touch as well. Let's see here. Yeah, so this is out from the side a touch. Let's go ahead and lift it a tiny bit. So it looks like it's overlapping that. And then let's go ahead and use our best friend thicken. And we're just going to go ahead and make this a child of the one we've already used. And that actually, right, was putting it on the inside of that sheet. And the question is if that looks better and more accurate, or if it's going to look more accurate to have it on the outside. And I think we might as well, or have it in the middle. So let's go ahead and click on the thicken. Under the object settings, right, we have it set to negative 100% for position. If we set that to 0, then it should be centered on our object. And yeah, you can see that probably looks a little bit better as far as those panels go. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit here. Yeah, and you can see that that's looking pretty good. Okay, so now we just have a couple things where, right, this back edge actually needs to extend further out, and that top edge also needs to extend a little bit further over the cab. And so we're going to go ahead and uncheck the thicken, so we just have our plane again. And we are going to make sure that we select our plane. And then we should be able to select this edge. So if we go to edges mode, and you'll note that there are some already selected. What we want to do is deselect all of those and just select that outside edge. And then we can actually just pull this over a little bit further. You'll note that potentially we could increase the bevel some, or we could just grab this one and slide that over a little bit too, just to make that a little bit softer. Again, this is showing the process. If you wanted to go deeper and make this more accurate, you can go ahead and do that. It just takes a lot more time to do those things. Okay, so then now I'm going to hold shift and I'm just going to select all these edges on the back side, because in the model, that back edge also extends a little bit out from the body of this. And we're just going to go ahead and go out just a touch. That should be enough just to show you kind of the process. So we've got a little bit of extension behind there. And so now I could turn thicken back on, and you can see that although it's hard to see without any edges and any lights in here, right? I've got this set. So let's go ahead and change display to garage shading lines. That'll help us see this a little bit better and see our polygons. Okay, so we've got that side. So let's go ahead and duplicate it. And to duplicate it, all we need to do is we just need to drop this into our symmetry. And as soon as we do that, we have the other side done. Fantastic. Right, so we're going to do the same process with these other two panels that are on here. So if you look, right, there's a panel down here, and there's this other panel here. And I'm going to go quickly through these. These are things that you can do on your own because we've just done this one. So do the same settings, right? Use your knife tool, cut around to cut this shape out, and then go through, use split to split it apart, move it out from the body a bit, thicken it, and you're good to go. And you can actually probably copy the thicken you used before and use those exact same settings. So I'm going to do that. I'll speed through this in the tutorial to save everybody a little bit of time. With this one, it pops into this other polygon, which shouldn't necessarily be an issue. You just want to make sure you select both of these polygons. Okay, so once we've got all of those points taken care of, one thing I just learned just now is that we can put multiple things in the thicken. So each one of these different panels is a child of the same thicken, so they all have the exact same settings. And if I needed to adjust the settings of the thicken, I can adjust the settings of all of them at the same time. So if I wanted this to be 2 centimeters thick, I could make it 2 centimeters thick for all of them. Or if I really wanted this to be all the way on the thickness to be all the way on the outside, which honestly I think I do, I can do that, and it applies to all 3 of those panels at the same time, or I guess all 6 of them. Okay, so let's go ahead and save that. That's a lot of work done. And now we can go ahead and maybe let's work on insetting the back. Okay, so the next step we need to do is let's go ahead and look at the back of this thing, because the schematics help a little bit, but really there's a side picture here that kind of shows the back. You can see there's an edge, but everything kind of sets in a little bit beyond that edge, and it looks like there's actually a couple tiers of that. We might just go and do a simple thing, but I want to show you how to make that happen and how to actually have a little bit of an edge there when this does happen. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to do is we are going to select our back polygon, and we're going to make sure we have the head object selected so we can select the back polygon. And then what we need to do is we need to use this inset. And what inset does is it's similar to bevel and extrude. However, it basically allows us to create an inset, right? So you can see we're able to create a little tiny bit of a boundary. And once we have that boundary, then we can use our extrude to push this panel into the back of the object. Before we do that, I just want to take one more look at a couple references. It looks like it goes back in pretty far. So we're going to go ahead and make that happen. So I'm going to go ahead and click and drag, and I'm just going to push it back until it's at a spot where I feel it's approximately where it needs to be. Now, one of the nice things about this is I'm not really going to do much to this polygon, so I could push it further back if I needed to, but I think that that's probably plenty of space to accommodate these different objects that are supposed to be in the back of this unit. Okay, so we've got that back using inset to create the edge, and then extrude to push into the object. So we've got that set. Now we've got one other cut that we really need to do that's important, that's going to be different than anything else we've done so far. And that's how we're going to put the circular top hatch into the top of this, right? We could bool a hole through the top surface. That can create kind of a huge mess when we're dealing with polygons. And it also just isn't quite great, because then you have to deal with like making the lid and everything else. Whereas we're going to do it in a way where we'll actually cut a hole in this and have the plug left over so that we can turn that into a piece of geometry. So let's go ahead and save our work. And to do this, one of the cool things with the cut tool is you can actually use splines as guides for cutting. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a circle spline. And the circle spline is, one, going to be huge, and two, it's going to be in the wrong orientation. So let's get it in the right orientation first. It should be in the XZ plane, right? It should be in the ground plane to start with. Then we also need to make it substantially smaller. We're going to make this, let's just make this 20. That looks like it might actually be pretty close to what we need. And now we can go ahead and either move this up manually, or we can potentially go to object mode, and we can use a tool we haven't used previously, which is this place tool. I'm going to go ahead and try and use the place tool. We're going to select the place tool. And what this does is it allows us to click and drag as long as we have our circle selected, we can click and drag on any surface in here, and we can actually get the object to align on the thing. Now, I want you to note there's these blue outlines are red. Red means it's not aligned with the object yet, and blue means it is aligned with the object. So what we might want to do, because this is like a free form placement tool, is we might actually want to start by just dragging this up and getting it pretty close to where we want it to be, so it's actually on axis. And then this seems like it's going to be way too far back. I don't know exactly where this hole lands, and I think it's kind of hard to see in most of these, but it looks like from here, it's somewhere before that front edge. And if we look at our schematics real quick, let's go ahead and take a look, see if we can see where that top hatch is. It looks like we're really pretty close. So at this point, we could either use the place tool to set the angle, or we can just rotate it until it's pretty close. Because this cut guide, what we want is we actually want the cut guide to be a little bit above the geometry that we're going to be cutting, so that it's going to be between the camera and the surface that's to be cut. So let's go ahead and we're just going to use the manual tools. We're just going to rotate this until it's close. Again, if we're off by a little bit, it's probably going to make our circle not quite perfectly circular, but that's fine. It looks like, I don't know what just happened. I'm going to go ahead and, okay, that's pretty good. I don't know how many degrees that is, but if we go to our object, it's 11.8 degrees is what mine ended up being. Yours might be slightly different. And again, this is just above that. Then what we need to do is we have a couple more steps to do. So first, we need to align our camera as near as we possibly can so that it seems pretty circular, right? That's going to be pretty close. And then once we've done that, we need to make our circle editable, which you can hit the letter C, and you'll see that that turns into a normal spline instead of a circle. Then we need to select the object that we want to cut, which is the head. And then we need to hit K, and we need to hold down Control. And why is this not? Oh, you know why? So we've selected the head, but what haven't we done? We have it set so we can't select things. There's a couple issues here, right? I have this set, but why can't I cut anything? Well, one, I don't have the polygon selected that I want to cut. And two, I'm in model mode and not polygon mode. So I'm going to go to polygon mode. I'm going to select that polygon. Then I'm going to take the knife. And now I'm going to go ahead, and if I hover over Control, while I'm hovering over that circle, you'll see I get this red and white dashed thing. Sometimes it looks like a full circle. Those look like full dots. But what that means is that now I can cut. So if I click, it's going to cut this perfect circle into the top surface of my object. It's pretty fantastic, right? So the circle we don't need any longer. We now have a hole and a potential lid. So yay, we've got that part done. Now the lid has a bunch of detail and stuff on it. We're just going to we could just make it thick for now, just so we know what's going on. And so I'm going to go ahead and select this, and I am going to split this, and I'm going to split it in a way where, right, it's going to leave a hole. So I want to right click on it while I have it selected, go to split, but I want to click on the gear because the last time I did this, I wanted to keep it there. So I want to uncheck that. I want to hit OK. Now I have this head.1. I should probably call this hatch. And I can just throw it in my thicken that has everything else in it. Now, I should probably label these all whatever panels they are, but I'm not going to be too worried about that at this point. Okay, so now we've got a hatch. If we rotated this hatch right now, right, it's just going to flip open as though it's like one of those trash cans with the flipping lids. But right, we could move our axis up here to this edge, and then that would help us create that point of rotation. But we don't have any of the hinge or anything made, so we're going to hold off on that for the time being. Okay, so now we've got our hatch. If we come back around here, we've also got the back fit. We're looking good. The last thing we need to do is to create these circle edges for some other weapons and equipment mounts. And then we will be in a pretty good spot with this model. And so I don't want to go, I'm going to show you how to make a couple of the guns on here, but we're going to keep some of this really simplified because if you look at our references, right, there's a lot of intense detail in here that we're not going to get into. We might look at how to do some of these little tiny details, but hopefully already kind of the process is starting to become clear to you, right? That we can build these things up. We can either do cuts so we get the right angle, or in the case of something like this, we'd actually probably, this would take a lot of modeling just to build that thing. So we probably won't create those at all for this tutorial, but we have a couple other little details here we could potentially do. But you get the idea that, right, if you just keep honing in on smaller and smaller details, the way that we've been building this part of the model, you can continue to add more and more detail. Now, if you're doing something for video game use, these are details that you would probably want to do as a texture, right? We could put these into the model, but it adds a ton more geometry. And this is something where, creating dark lines, you can actually create bump maps and things like that, where you can like fake subtle like textures like panel lines and things like that on an object, rather than creating it with geometry. Some of these other details you would want to do, you'd still need to model if you really wanted them that detailed. But again, with every model you make, you should be thinking about how far from the camera is this thing going to be? How big is it going to be on screen? Is it going to be, a major element? Does it need to have full detail? Or is it going to be something that people are only going to see from a distance? And these are things that you need to think about as you're working through this, because that saves resources. It saves you time in making it. And it really, it's just part of the planning of the object. Not everything needs to be made to an insane level of detail.